Hello everyone and welcome to today's video where we will go through the subject of communications, or more specifically the topic of weather information. So we will go through METARs, ATIS, TAFs, and all of these weather and meteorological oriented things. So whether you are here to remind yourself of what they are for your flying, or you're studying for comms or MET, this will be a great opportunity to give you a few tips and a nice revision for these specific topics. We'll go through 5 of the questions, we'll go through 2 real METARs, and then also I'll show you bits and pieces from the Annex 3 of ICAO conventions, which talks about meteorological information for air navigation. So let's jump into question number 1 and go through these topics. So an aircraft is not fitted with ACARS. How could the pilot receive weather reports from a specific airfield? So this question is relatively tricky. There are a couple of ways for us to receive information, the weather information from airports. Of course, the first two are the most obvious. The first one will be the VOLMET and the second the ATIS. So Aerodrome Terminal Information Service, which is the ATIS. This is something that is usually broadcast by either broadcast VORs or specific stations. And this will give us both meteorological and operational information like the approach, runway news, and the weather at that station. VOLMET, however, will transmit either TAFs, METARs, SPECIs, or broadcasted SIGMETs, and VOLMETs will use the HF, the high frequency range, most often, so they can be used across very far distances. For the exams, anything above 250 nautical miles. And also remember that VOLMETs will usually cycle through, let's say, 10-15 airports. So you will hear a METAR for one airport, then a METAR for another. So if you miss it, unfortunately, you still have to listen through all the previous ones. However, here you can see there is a keyword here, reports. Reports will usually be for a VOLMET, as it's a METAR. Of course, all the other answers do not make much sense. ATIS frequency, you do not inquire for the ATIS on the frequency. ATIS is an automatic transmission. You can ask the ATC, absolutely. AFIS, either this will not give you any weather information on its own. And lastly, to request a segment on the international weather frequency, this is not something that is done. I've never heard of the international weather frequency either, to be entirely honest with you. However, remember, VOLMETs, they transmit TAFs, METARs, SIGMETs, and SPECIs, and they use HF, so longer distances, anything above 250 nautical miles, because of the frequency range used for the transmission. And lastly, remember that VOLMET will be the only one that will actually give you true rather than magnetic wind directions. I'll get to it in a later question. And now for question number 2. So this is a classic question where we need to decipher a METAR. So let's go through this together. It always helps. So we have this METAR station for an airport. The wind is blowing from 210 degrees at 10 knots. The visibility is 2,200 meters. We have scattered cumulonimbus clouds, or the CBs, at 1,500, and broken clouds at 2,500 feet. QNH, which is our barometric reference, is 1,020 hectopascals, and we have blowing snow. Blowing snow is by far the worst meteorological condition you can encounter when it comes to visibility. Blowing snow can reduce the visibility down to 5 meters, essentially making any landings almost impossible, unless it's a no DH, no RVR landing. However, most of these, even cut-free landings, will be prohibited when we have blowing snow. So now, of course, knowing this information, you can decipher and decide that the right one will be the visibility 2200, QNH 1020, and blowing snow. All the other ones will not make much sense. Now going into METAR number 3. So again, the same situation, and let's go through the METAR together, and then we'll talk about the wind directions and which ones are used for which transmission of information in a weather sense. Of course, EGLL, or Echo Golf Lima Lima, it's a code for the airport. I don't remember, to be entirely honest with you. I believe it can be Leeds in the UK. However, we have this METAR issued on the 8th day of the month at 1:20 Zulu or UTC. The wind is blowing at 210 from 210 degrees at 10 knots. The visibility is 10 kilometers or more, scattered clouds at 3000. The temperature is 7 degrees with the dew point at 4. Whenever we have a spread is the difference between temperature and dew point, 3 degrees or less, we can expect some fog, so remember for your flying. The QNH is 1023 hectopascals. No significant weather is reported. The wind reported here is, of course, 210 degrees at a speed of 10 knots. The question now is whether it's true or magnetic. So there's a rule of thumb that whatever is written is true, whatever is spoken is magnetic. Spoken, so whenever a tower or ATC gives you wind information, or whenever you hear it on the ATIS, in that case, the wind will be magnetic. However, if you read your METAR, you read your TAF, or, and this is an exception, you get your VOLMET, because VOLMETs transmit METARs and TAFs, your wind information will be true. So this is just something to remember. So of course, when it comes to the METAR, the wind is 210 degrees, true, and on the speeds of 10 knots. This knots is our standard unit when it comes to aviation. And now let's go into question number 4. So what is the definition of CAVOK, or simply clouds and visibility? Okay. And this question actually is beloved by instructors and examiners, so I'm sure you'll see it once or twice throughout your flight training once you finish the theory, as this question gets asked all the time, whether during PPL or CPL even exams and training. So it's good to remember. So what is the definition of clouds and visibility, okay, or CAVOK? The first thing you should think about when you see CAVOK on a METAR is that the weather is generally good. So clear skies and definitely VFR weather. Remember the minima for VFR, as this is where the question is trying to trick you, is 5 kilometers or visibility or more is required below 10,000 feet, and above 10,000 feet to fly VFR, you need at least 8 kilometers of visibility. However, CAVOK means that the weather is good, so 9999 on METAR essentially, which is 10 kilometers or more. There can be no significant cloud below 5,000 feet. And remember, significant cloud, generally speaking, means few or scattered is okay. Broken or overcast will not be okay for CAVOK below 5,000 feet. Also, the CAVOK, by definition, says that there can be no significant cloud below the 5,000 feet mark, or the MSA, whichever is higher. Something to remember, which is not here in the question. And lastly, of course, no significant weather, which generally speaking means thunderstorms, convective clouds like cumulonimbus, towering cumulonimbus, or cumulus clouds. So going back here, visibility is 10K or more, no significant cloud below 5,000 feet or the MSA, and no significant weather present. And for the last question, which information can aircraft in flight obtain by VOLMET? So of course, as we already discussed, VOLMET is usually used across longer distances, and for the exam's sake, around 250 nautical miles or more. Anything below that, we can usually get the ATIS. Some airports will also have the ATIS, the digital ATIS, which you can check on the ground charts of that airport or in the AOI in the charts. And this will allow us to gather the weather information via the data link. However, for these questions' sake, VOLMETs will usually be using HF frequency. There are some designated VHF frequencies between 118 and 138 megahertz in the VHF range. However, generally speaking, HF because of the range, and it will transmit species, TAFs, METARs, and broadcasted SIGMETs. This question is a little bit ambiguous, and I totally understand it. However, remember the primary focus here will be a METAR. Most VOLMETs, when operational, will keep transmitting METARs for 10, 15, 20 different airports in a row. Basically, they'll go airport 1, METAR, airport 2, METAR. So if you want to get a message from a specific airport and you just missed it, sometimes you'll need to listen to the VOLMET for another 10 minutes in order for it to cycle through again. And this will be everything. However, as promised, I wanted to show you the ICAO Annex 3, so Meteorological Service for air navigation or international air navigation, and I highly recommend that you jump in there. And these are all the recommendations, and here you can check everything when it comes to the METARs. So I just wanted to show you real quick here at page 122 and 21, you'll see all the shortcuts and the abbreviations used in METARs, from precipitation to obscurations. For example, for the fog, as you can see, which remember, fog is always visibility below 1,000, and anything 1000 to 5000 will be mist or dust or other things. Any obscuration above 5000 meters of reduced visibility will not be reported. However, going back, you can see all of these things are here. Mike India or MI will be shallow. We have also patches, vicinity, etc. So different names for different abbreviations. However, here you can see all of them as you will study and prepare for your flying and the exams. I highly recommend you have a read. And also, I highly recommend that you jump into page number 133. And here you can see a template for METAR or SPECI directly from the source. This is where all of these are taken, and this is an internationally used template for the METARs. You can see from the first one, we will always have the identification of the report, the location, so the airport, time of the observation, like here at 22nd day of the month, 1630 UTC. Then and then of course, as we go forward, we have the surface winds, visibility, RVR, etc, etc. However, I highly recommend that you come in here and take a look. Like you see, present weather, so either intensifying or increasing, thunderstorm with rain, or with minus, decreasing snow in this example. However, I highly recommend that you jump into the ICAO Annex 3. This is exactly the source. This is exactly the documentation that guides these meteorological stations and reports. And I highly recommend that you jump in there during your studies. However, this will be everything from the weather and meteorological information topic of comms. I hope this was interesting. As always, if you have any comments, feel free to ask and we'll do our best to come back to you. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.